Sam, defend your team, because they haven't won.
Strap yourselves in, it's another 1 hour episode.
Oh, yeah.
Spike defused.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Press 4 to Defuse, your weekly update on all things competitive Valorant. As you can see, it is only one familiar face this week. I've been absent for a couple of weeks, and so apparently it's my turn to wind up with a bunch of random strangers. But you should probably know who they are, so let's get that done and dusted with. So we'll start with our first guest, and it is Sully. How are you doing today?
I'm doing just fine. I'm happy to be on this show. I watch this quite frequently, so you know, it feels good to be on for once.
Yeah. Hell yeah. And Tanner, how are you?
Good. This is my first chance ever to say long-time listener, first-time caller. So
hey. Oh, that's amazing. I love that we've got some avid fans on the show. Pretty cool. All right, well, without further ado, I think it's time that we just jump straight in because we have so much news to cover. So we're going to jump into Run It Back, where we talk about the news that has happened over the last week. And we're going to be starting off, of course, as usual, with the roster changes. First up, now this happened just before we went live last week, so we weren't able to cover it. But Tanny has been let go from OG. Unfortunately, things just were not gelling for them as a team. And really unfortunate, you actually see as we get on to the next slide, it was his birthday when they let him know. But the cool thing is he's been picked up by SMB, Supermassive Blaze, which is, of course, the Turkish super team. And he's going to be helping them with the upcoming challenges run. Guys, how do we feel about that? Sully, what do you think?
Honestly, I don't think it's like too big of an issue for OG, and I think it's like works out mutually for both sides, right? Tanny gets to go do a different team, work with a whole different lineup, and OG, it's a team that you expect to have really good results and that you expect to make super deep runs. So, you know, changes are meant to happen. Unfortunately, it was on his birthday, just really unlucky timing, I think, in his mind. But I think overall, it's kind of a mutual agreement. Both parties part ways. It's nothing like bad blood. It seems like it just didn't pan out the way they were hoping.
yeah, and it's not. I mean, it stings just because you didn't have the worst showing, right? Like we've had teams, I guess, in NA that have had worse runs and still kind of hang on. But I definitely think it helps level up that Turkey scene, especially with the history and the background that Tanny has now coming in to help this. I guess I don't know how much more help Supermassive Blaze needs, but the more the merrier.
Honestly. Yeah, and I know that Tanny's actually helped or worked with some of those players in the past as well. So being able to bring in that little bit of extra synergy, obviously the players and him, they get along, they kind of understand how they work. I think this is going to be really massive. Like you said, as if they need any more help. I mean, this is why it's called the super team. So we'll see how super they are. We'll move on to the next announcement, and that is Na'Vi have officially entered Valorant. This is super, super exciting. One of the main names that kind of sticks out there for me is Dinks, who's been around the EU scene for quite some time back in First Strike and Ignition. But this is it looks like a pretty stacked roster. Tanner, what do you think of this roster?
Yeah, I actually really like this. So previously, no pressure. Just recently playing, you could catch their matchups, obviously, from stage 3 Challengers 1. And this was, I was actually watching Sideshow, just VOD review, and I think it wasn't maybe for the Na'Vi roster specifically, but it just happened to be this game. And only good things to say, only good things to see. It was also a map, I believe we saw Breeze, so it was kind of cool seeing these players the way that they worked. Unfortunately, it was against Gambit. They do end up losing. But that's tough. What I'm hoping for a roster like this is, again, kind of to compare it to what we see a whole lot, or at least for me in NA, is we see these star-studded rosters that are unsigned. They get signed, and sometimes they don't compute the results that the org is looking for. So I really hope, with being picked up by an organization like Na'Vi, that this team just continues to push forward.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement with Tanner. I think like Na'Vi, they make a very good move picking up this roster. They had a really good run in the CIS playoffs. They qualified for the main event at EMEA. And like you said earlier, Sam, is that there's so much talent, right? I did a little VOD reviewing myself against Gambit, against Forza. They looked really strong. There are 5 players that have a lot of experience, and you hope that they can compete with the best that Europe has to offer as well, and perhaps maybe make a really deep run in the main event moving forward.
I think it's really nice to be seeing a lot more organizations getting involved as well, particularly orgs like Na'Vi. I mean, they've been having so much success recently in games like Counter-Strike. Their name is everywhere. So much like TSM and Sentinels, it puts a little bit of pressure on you to do well because it's Na'Vi. The name kind of propels you a little bit, which is probably why they took their time getting into the scene. So picking up a team like this, I think is going to be really, really great stuff. We'll see if it does actually pan out, because we've said it before. Teams do well, and then they get picked up, and then suddenly things just stop working out.
Yeah.
Hopefully not the case this time around. We'll be moving on now. Next team that we're going to talk about, of course, is Heretics. Now, this is an interesting one. So we've been speaking about Heretics in G2 over the past couple of weeks and how they had their roster musical chairs. And it was actually Ryan who said he felt that Heretics kind of got the worse off in the deal. And we've actually seen how well the G2 have been doing. And now it seems that, unfortunately, Artis, some health issues means that he's going to be warming the bench for a little while. But it's a great opportunity for Emilwa, who will be stepping in. And of course, he has been playing right now, in fact, and was playing yesterday with Heretics. So how do we feel about this change for Heretics? Sully, we'll start with you.
I mean, I'm not super okay. So it's kind of like the typical NA EU thing, like, oh my gosh, NA is so inconsistent from the EU side, and then EU is so inconsistent from the NA side. So I always what I know is that Heretics was the best. And then I'm like, okay, what happened here? G2 is the best. I think it's about time that Heretics maybe make a change. So far with Emilwa stepping in, they haven't looked bad at all. I think that they've made some pretty significant changes in terms of their style a little bit. Maybe not too major, but I think that it's unfortunate that Artis has to step away. I really hope he returns, because I remember when I used to watch him, he looked so good. So I'm hoping that this isn't a permanent change, and Artis could find a new home somewhere if Emilwa is really strong here. But Team Heretics, they're one of those teams that you expect to do really well, and Emilwa, I think he's a good step in as well for Artis, who unfortunately has to take the bench for a little bit.
I think the scariest thing for it is so you have to, I guess, if you were to give the players a player rating and you say, okay, Artis is out. He was playing out of 100. We'll say he was playing at 70. He had 70 points as a player in player rating, like any sports game ever, right? Yeah. And then you bring in Emilwa, and it's literally, it's very close to a direct 1-for-1. So the change isn't that much unless this player is just, light years or able to play light years ahead of Artis, who is, a big name in the scene, right? People know who that player is. So it doesn't feel like, it feels like a Band-Aid, basically, just for Artis to get healthy. I don't think that this is specifically what is going to push Team Heretics kind of over the edge to put them back into the contention for top 1, top 2, top 3. It very well could be, and I could be wrong, but it's not a drastic change, I guess. It feels kind of just okay, here we go. We take a Sova out, we put a Sova in, and then we run it back.
Now, my potential hot take, and I say potential because I don't know, maybe a whole bunch of people actually agree with this, and I'm not as crazy as I think I am, but Artis, so when the swap came through and G2 swapped Artis onto Heretics, I was like, wait, what? They're getting rid of Artis? How can they do this? He's such a good player. But as the games have continued, I've started to think, well, I don't know if he's not playing at the same level as he has been before, or if it's just other players are catching up and he's kind of stagnating, where other players are continuing to kind of evolve and experiment and learn new things. And it's kind of felt like he hasn't been all the way there. Now, maybe part of that is to do with whatever these health issues are. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's mental health, physical health. I have no idea. It just says health issues. So that could have been a contributing factor. If it was mental health, definitely. If it was like a wrist injury, absolutely. So that can be a factor. But I don't know if this is going to be a case of when he's better, we'll bring him back on. This might, we see this very often where a player will get benched, a team will bring on a different player and go, whoa, this works. And that benched player never sees the light of day again.
So your hot take is that it was that Artis is kind of slowly been on the decline, or your hot take is that G2 was like, okay, we noticed maybe some health issues. Let's go ahead and, get the most out of this player that we can before letting people know.
That definitely was not my take, but that's a fun take.
That's what I thought
you
you
were
were headed with.
Squeeze
Way
him for
off the
all
mark
he's
there.
worth,
Well,
get like every last drop.
It's so recent, right? It's so it's leaves in June, joins in June, and maybe obviously as Artis as a player isn't going to want to say, yeah, I'm having problems. I have whatever the health issues may be, right? Even if it's a wrist issue, and it's not something that is physically apparent, but it is affecting his gameplay. He's not going to say anything for however long until finally it's like, all right, well, I have to get something done about it. If you kind of leave that G2 team, you jump into Heretics and immediately you say, hey, my wrist is, messed up, or my ex is messed up, and I can't, and I don't mean ex-girlfriend, I mean ex is in like in parentheses, whatever.
Yeah, we got that.
It could be his ex-girlfriend.
Just making sure. Yeah, so it's like obviously the player's not going to say anything, the org's not going to say anything because they want the most money out of the player or the most out of the
so wait,
shuffles
you're
in the
saying
roster.
that
So.
G2
You're painting them in
G2
such a
sold
bad light.
faulty merch.
I don't. Hey, it's. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a business. This is a business,
Oh
right?
my God.
So I'm just.
Gotta
I
get
don't
the
know
bag.
what's going on
Gotta get
behind the
bag.
scenes, and
This
I have
did
no
not
bad
go where I
blood
thought it was
towards
going.
G2, but I'm just very possible. Very possible.
Anyway, moving on. So this isn't an org. I don't know what this team's name is, but drum roll please. Shroud is going to be competing in VCT NA. This is very, very exciting. I think a lot of people have been kind of hoping that he'll get back into the competitive sphere. And of course, he's going to be playing with Relics. Now, there were some rumors about Sean Garris and one other player. I can't remember who it was, but there were some problems there. Nothing, that's right. And they weren't able to get that together. But this looks pretty good. Relic, Shroud, Timmy, Sean, and Lasky. Tanner, what do you think of this roster? How do you think they're going to do in VCT?
So I like. Okay, this is hard. So I like this. I love these players. The only one that I was unsure of was it's Timmy, and I went back and took a look. And the one thing that we've seen the most from Valorant is that it's bringing people from all across the board in terms of competitive gaming: Overwatch, Apex, Counter-Strike, tactical shooters, not tactical shooters. Everybody is getting their piece of the pie, and Timmy is absolutely insane, obviously at Valorant, but I was taking a look back at the VODs and just an insane Apex player through the roof. And obviously all of these guys can play basically every shooter at the highest level, but I think that brings that extra mind, right? We saw Sinatra doing so well coming over from Overwatch because it was more like, hey, look at what we can do with the utility, and we're starting to see more of that. So I think that alone is such a good addition to have on the team, or just like a +1 for the team. And then you have the rest of the names behind it that are just insane. Unfortunately, I don't think that this is, slapping 5 really strong players isn't the recipe for success. We actually just saw it yesterday in the Nerd Street Open with the bench warmers. It was Shinobi, Stellar, Alexander, Calypso, and Sharky, and they get knocked out in the round of 16. So I'm not saying that that's going to happen to Shroud's team, but I don't think if you're a fan of these players, you can't expect too much, right? Don't get mad if they get knocked down in the round of 64 or something of the sort.
Yeah, yesterday I was talking with Upmind and Veli, and we were like, dude, look at this team. And then we were all like, yeah, it's a cool team, but are they really gonna make it far? We expect them to maybe make at most a round of 32, and then they get slapped up by a top 16 team in North America. So it's cool. Do we expect them to make a far run? Probably not. I think if anything, it's comparable to the old guys club that Shroud was playing with way back in MDL. It's just a for fun team, and we'll see how far they can go and make content around it. So I think it's super sick nonetheless, though.
Yeah. I think the other thing is, like, I haven't had a chance to really peruse the bracket. And again, I don't actually know what they've called themselves, but it's very likely that in the round of 16, they wind up playing against someone like TSM. And like, what do you do in that situation? Okay, if they're playing against random citizen number 64, they might make it through. But if it's against a TSM, a Renegades, a Sonics, whatever, I don't know if they're gonna make it through being a kind of slapped together team.
Maybe against TSM, who knows? Maybe against
I was watching
no shade, no
NSG.
shade, no shade.
I was watching like some of the NSG, and TSM were not even in that tournament yesterday. But the whole of chat for a solid 20 minutes, TSM is a tier 2 team. I'm like, why are you talking about TSM? Not only are they not playing, they're not even in the tournament. God. Anyways, but that begs the question. So, okay, go ahead.
Go ahead. No. You ask the question, and then maybe I'll have the answer.
Okay. So this begs the question. Do we think that Shroud might actually make a return to actual competitive, or do you think this is just a, well, it's the last VCT of the year, heck it, let's see what fun we can have?
So I want to say this maybe kind of answers the question. I guess it'll kind of give us a taste as to where their mental is. But so Sully was saying, if they play, round of 32, round of 16, they play against a team that's kind of been pieced together. Well, in the round of 64, they're, I guess, slated to play against Easy 5, which has been the best unsigned team that we've seen. So I think that alone is going to be a huge ego check. And the problem now, I don't want to compare these two players, but we've been seeing Freakazoid play Valorant pretty consistently for a really long time, and is still playing for the Goofy Goobers or something of the sort. Hasn't been picked up, and it is an insane fragger. I think Shroud kind of in that same boat, where obviously a different player in his own right, but you don't see too many teams looking to go out and grab these players. Although great players, if Freakazoid's still on the bench, I feel like maybe the same for Shroud, unless he does take this 5-stack and says, all right, guys, let's keep running at it. We tried, stage 3. It didn't go our way, but we scrim, we practice. I think if Shroud does come back to competing, it will have to be through making his own team.
Yeah, I think if anything, it'll have to be making his own team. What I'm more interested in is, like, is Relic's going to come back? Because I know that his time on Cloud9, like, if this is the team that Relic wants to play with, I'd be super interested to watch it. But for Shroud, I think it's unlikely. But if it were to happen, it would probably be with his own team, in agreement with Tanner, basically.
Yeah. All right, cool. Let's keep going because we've spent quite a bit of time on this one. So some really interesting news in the female sphere. And that is that Galorants have teamed up officially with Gen G. Now, Gen G have been kind of supporting a lot of the Galorants events recently, but they are partnering up in a more official sense with the VCT Game Changers Academy tournaments. Now, for those that don't know, of course, we have Game Changers, which is the main female event in Valorant, but they also have the Academy, which has been run by Galorants. It isn't really a prize pool there, but it's how you get into Game Changers. It's part of the qualifier. So Gen G are partnering up there, and this is pretty exciting. I'm kind of hoping we might see things like prize pools or something to that extent once this happens, but I think it's a good look for the scene. Tanner, what do you think?
Yeah, I think this is great. I love this initiative as a whole. It's something that has been a problem for a really long time, and we're kind of starting to see the results of I guess neglect towards creating a safe space or even a scene where women can compete, because it's obviously the levels are different because you don't have the competitive experience. So I love that, although I think a bit too late. Or later than it should have happened, we are finally getting it. And I think this is really cool because, like you said, prize pools quite possibly. And then if, you're the Galorants Discord or you're anybody working on the Galorants and you're reaching out for partnership, maybe people don't quite know who Galorants are, but everybody's going to know who Gen G is. So when it's Gen G backing you and being on your side, whether it be the teams getting hooked up with gear for winning or, like you said, prize pools, I think this is so cool, again, for an initiative that we have needed for far too long.
Yeah, complete agreement with Tanner. I mean, this is something that's been, I feel like, in the works for quite some time, and now that it's finally coming, it's just going to help elevate the female scene, right? Well, I hopefully this is like another gateway into like having female teams compete in the larger circuits of like VCT, and then everyone kind of gets involved, and we really see the female scene start to grow. So I'm super excited for this partnership, and I honestly cannot wait to see what it unfolds in the future.
Yeah, and we just wrapped up VCT NA Part 2 Electric Boogaloo quite recently. So hopefully we'll get Part 3 soon. Hopefully EU will get a Part 1.
Fingers crossed.
Hoping
Fingers
and
crossed.
praying, honestly. But we'll get into the female scene a little bit later on. For now, let's get that rumor mill churning. And of course, it is George Geeds with all of our fun little spicy gossip. And first and foremost, Anbox in talks to pick up the Wifo, who of course was playing for Exet recently. Sally, what do you think about this?
Okay, this is like a move that from the outside looks really smart because, you know, Thlyfo, he was a phenomenal player on Exet. He looked really good in his time with that core 5 with Weeded when Weeded was still there. But I truthfully do not think this is the fix that Anbox need. If it is going to be the fix, it's going to take quite some time. Yeah, Seb, he didn't have the best performance throughout the challenges that they had, right? He was like -20 on a game or two here or there. So he didn't have the best performance. So from the outside, it's like, okay, this change makes a lot of sense. But there's just a lot of issues I see with Anbox, right? They're a shell of their former self. It feels like their IGLing structure has kind of fallen off since JC Stani stepped in. Not saying that he's the issue, but I just don't think Thlyfo is going to be the remedy to the issues that Anbox have, at least instantaneously. I could be wrong, and honestly, I hope I am proven wrong.
So I agree. And to, I guess, kind of piggyback off of that, those are my two players that I thought for Anbox we're struggling. We're having issues. And if it is JC Stani calling for this team, I understand that it's not, you're not going to frag out every single time as the IGL in X role, right? But then to also have Seb, who is a bit lower in that frag department, which, again, not your duelist, you're not expecting the most, but you need to get a bit more. I think adding Thlyfo will help kind of level up the team a bit. And I guess for Anbox fans, right, I'm impartial, but I would hope that in, you know, bringing in Thlyfo to, for Seb, it allows, I guess, relieves some pressure off of the rest of the team and saying, okay, we know that Thlyfo is going to be good all by themselves, going to be hanging out, finding the frags that we need, getting the impact done. And then it allows JC Stani to, again, step back, call for the team, get a better look at the map. I do think Thlyfo is a level up. But like Sully said, that's not the only issue, and you're really, I think for Thlyfo, you're expecting a lot. I think if you're Anbox, you're putting a lot of weight on that player's shoulders to kind of say, hey, fix us. And I know that that's not what they're asking, but that's kind of what's implied with it.
You make it sound like one of those toxic relationships where like you date someone so you can fix them. That's terrible, man. Tanner with all the weird takes today.
The rebound.
The rebound, that's where it is.
Exactly.
I feel like this is some sort of a Band-Aid fix because Anbox had such an explosive burst onto the scene when they first announced, they won that first tournament right after their announcement. And then ever since then, it's just been, I won't say a full-on downward spiral. They haven't reached like the bottom of the barrel just yet. They haven't quite slipped into tier 2 territory just yet. They've been consistent, but they've been consistently mediocre, which for an org like Anbox is definitely not acceptable. So hopefully this is kind of helping them to start that upward trajectory. I'm not expecting like a massive explosion and suddenly they're the best team in NA, but if they can start to make that upward climb and start to patch those mistakes, find the holes in the boat and patch them up so that you can kind of start floating again. Hopefully they can start to get a little bit better. Let's move on to our next rumor. This is kind of heading back over to the EU region, and that is Vitality looking to replace Jesmond with Shalaby from Anubis. Now, we are going to get into the Campus Clutch a little bit later on, but of course, Shalaby was the jet player for Anubis, the team from Egypt that came out of nowhere and managed to win out the Campus Clutch. Sully, what do you think of this potential pickup?
I think it's so sick for the collegiate scene. Like overall, like to know that Shalaby wins Red Bull Campus Clutch and now he's got a chance to play on like a tier 1 team in EU. It's super, super sick. Now, excuse me, the change with Jesmond is interesting because like I don't think he was performing horribly. Like Vitality, yeah, they had their bumps in the road, but I think that it's not necessarily like a change that needed to happen, but the fact that it is happening is still super sick, and it elevates the love of the collegiate scenes. Like, okay, finally collegiate is getting some recognition, which you don't see in a lot of other esports. So it's really cool that this is happening in my eyes.
Yeah, I mean, that is it kind of been for traditional sports the route that you go, right?
Yeah.
You play the sport for your entire life. You do it in high school if you can. Then you go to college and you hope to get drafted. Well, this is essentially Shalaby getting drafted after having a really kind of like a first round draft pick out of the campus clutch coming on through. The thing that I think that kind of brings problems for this is it's not a one-to-one swap. So the roles on the team are going to have to adjust. Jesmine is playing the Sentinel Viper. Shalaby, likes to get a little bit aggressive. I saw him playing on the Jet. So it's not a one-for-one. I think it's definitely going to take some time. And the scariest thing is, unlike traditional sports and esports, these players don't have a lot of time. We see organizations make changes so quickly. So I would really hate for Shalaby to join this team, have all this momentum behind him, and then because the team is kind of figuring out where everybody's going to play, how the roster is going to move around, and figure out everybody's roles, and then somebody else is getting let go because of that. So I hope for these players' sake that you give it some time, and you just allow Shalaby to do Shalaby things, because we know that is what he is capable of doing.
I think the fact that he's quite young definitely works in his favor. Now, obviously, a lot of players in the Valorant scene are quite young. That is kind of just the nature of things. But he's recently competed, as we've mentioned, in the campus clutch. So there's been a lot of eyes on him all around Europe. Obviously, that's where this initial pickup came from. So if it does implode for whatever reason, and we see him back on the Valorant streets in the next 3 to 4 weeks, I think that there's still enough of momentum off the back of Campus Clutch. Plus, he's going to be performing in this VCT. So even if he's not a great fit right now, hopefully, he gets a couple games streamed. He gets to scrim with some of those higher tier teams, because obviously they come from Egypt. Anubis has been together for quite some time, but they're mainly scrimming, I would assume anyway, mostly in their own region, and maybe some of like the tier 2 teams in Europe. Now, being on one of these big teams, there's definitely more potential to get noticed. So if it does go boom, hopefully he gets more opportunities there. We're going to head over onto our next rumor, and that is that BBG are going to be making some changes to their coaching. They're going to be potentially picking up Raptors from Moon Raccoons Black. And here's the other thing, kind of small little fine print at the bottom. Trill will likely be starting over Critical in the upcoming VCT. So new coach and potentially new starter. Tanner, what do you think?
I guess I'm the rumor starter on the show today. Again, this is not
clip
gospel.
Everything Tanner says and put it on Reddit.
I'm just tossing it out there, and I might get some hate for it, but Critical is up there for top Sova players, if not one of the best, best. And Trill to be starting over Critical tells me that it's definitely not a performance issue. It's probably something going on behind the scenes, and that is obviously never good for any of the squads. It's also, I didn't take a peek at the most recent performance, but Virtuoso just beat BBG in the Nerd Street Open in the round of 16. So maybe Critical did underperform there. But when I watch Critical play, I mean, this guy never misses. So this tells me that something's going on behind the scenes. I don't know.
Yeah. Keep in mind, this is the guy that Ninja accused for cheating. So, of course, he doesn't miss. True. He never misses. So,
right.
Now that Tanner touched on Trill coming in for Critical, I'll go to Raptors. I think that it's a nice move to bring in the former Moon Raccoons coach, right? He was the guy that brought them up literally from nothing, and now those guys have kind of found their separate ways. I think it's kind of like a similar thing from Built by Gamers. Obviously, they're like a signed team, but they are struggling. And Moon Raccoons before were struggling. Raptors comes in, he's able to elevate them. So I'm hopeful that we'll see BBG kind of return to form, right? They're challengers 2 form, where they're able to take down Sentinels, and then they kind of flopped out of the rest of the event. Maybe Raptors bring something in. He's able to elevate the team and kind of bring them back to like the top of tier 2, where I'd say right now they're like in the middle of it, kind of slowly falling behind the rest of the teams.
You got to think, with Raptors coming in and this potential swap up to the lineup, he's probably had a hand in it. So there's
Yeah.
surely some line of reasoning there that, you know, we just can't quite grasp for whatever reason. Whatever's happening behind the scenes, in the scrims, in the practice room, there's very clearly a reason for it. But of course, results will speak louder than our opinions. So see how they do. Like we said, they just lost to Virtuoso quite recently, but hopefully they can pick that one up. Now, we started off the show with some really sad birthday news, as it says in the title, but we're moving on to a really cool feels good moment. We kind of need more of these, I think, in Valorant. And honestly, massive hat tip to Virtuoso for doing this. So basically, for those that don't know, in the PAX Arena tournament, EZ5 were disqualified. It turned out that Decop, who is a Mexican citizen, was not able to, he was actually not eligible to compete in the tournament. So just before the match between EZ5 and Virtuoso, PAX came in, they said, listen, sorry, you guys are disqualified, you have an ineligible player. Virtuoso were like, well, in all fairness and in competitive integrity, we just don't want to continue playing if that's the case. And they completely withdrew themselves from the tournament. A really massive move from this team. And again, shout out to Anders, friend of the show. And it's really interesting because these are the two teams. So Tanner, you said a little bit earlier that EZ5 is the best unsigned team in North America. And I think that it's a little bit of a tie here between Virtuoso and EZ5. So it was really nice to see that one happen. But Knights GG, the heroes that they are, they really were the knight in shining armor, came through and said, all right, you know what? Show match. About 20 minutes later, got some casters, got a production crew, threw it together, and EZ5 got to play against Virtuoso. It wasn't in the tournament. There was no prize money involved, but a little bit of a showcase match, but it was fun. It was EZ5 that came out on top 2-0. But it's just nice to see the community kind of rallying together in these really weird situations. What do you guys think about that one? Sully?
I think it's super unfortunate. Obviously, it's like PAX. It's like a very big oversight. But if this, like, imagine this mistake were to happen later down the line with a much bigger team. I think it's okay, not good that it happens here, but it's like, okay, it happens at this level. It's a 10K event. We already know EZ5 are one of the best free agent teams. It's not too big of a loss because we obviously know they're going to be competing and grinding even more. So it's a little bit of an oversight from PAX, but obviously mistakes happen. Contractual things kind of come up and things blip out. So not too big of like a big loss, I'd say, for EZ5, knowing the level they are. But, you know, having Knights come in, like you said, they're the knight in shining armor. Jasper's the GOAT. He brings it. He comes in clutch every time.
Yeah, Jasper's the GOAT. That's exactly what my thought was on this. Really cool to see. They also, like you said, Sam, they just whipped it all together super quick. The matchup seemed fun. It seemed like the players were just out there having a good time. I don't know how seriously they were taking it because it was just a showcase. And then I love that the hashtag justice for Decop was on the stream the entire time in one of the lower thirds. I guess to speak a little bit more broadly real quick is this is an oversight from PAX Arena, and it looks really bad because I think they had some sponsors pull out from this one. EZ5 was also a team that they invited to play, so kind of just let you know where their heads are at when you're not really doing your research on the team. It's a really bad look overall. Now, it's not as bad as some of the TOs that we've seen in the scene who unfortunately have done bad things to good people as far as talent goes. Pulse Arena, but it's not a good look at all.
Yeah. Well, at least it all had a happy-ish ending towards the end. And again, that's like a really big feels good just seeing how the community comes together like that. It's really great. All right, let's head on over. We kind of mentioned Campus Clutch for a little bit as we spoke about Shalabi. So we're going to like dive into the meat of it. We won't go through the entire tournament. We're just going to take a look at the finals. But the first thing I wanted to note was the studio looked clean.
Yes.
Damn. Like watching the teams and the desk. Oh, that is so sad. Too bad, you have to deal with it. All right, moving on. So it was so cool seeing like the teams and the desk on location, and it gives such a different vibe. And there was like a small handful of audience that were there as well that like kind of pulled through to watch, and you could like hear them cheering, and they were trying really hard to make it sound like it was a stadium packed full of people, but you could feel their excitement and their love, and really looking forward to getting back to that. So I guess the first question I want to ask you guys is, how are we feeling about international collegiate university Valorant, Tanner?
I think that kind of what we saw in professional, international. The play styles are different. The way that teams move, their thought process is a whole lot different. There's also very large gaps in the talent as well between the teams. So there's definitely some leveling up to be done, but esports is really just starting to boom. I live in Arizona, and just last year it got sanctioned. You could get your varsity letter in esports, and I know that that's not happening everywhere. So we're taking steps the right way. And this is also cool to get, just like everybody wants to see, the best teams play each other from the best regions. Teams want to see the best players in the world, the best up-and-coming players. Who's going to give them the most bang for their buck? Because you got the young cats, just like Shalaby getting signed. You get a whole lot more of that. So it's everybody wins, basically, in an event like this.
Yeah, I'm super happy that it's happening like at this level as well. And I know Redbull, they've got like, I'm not going to spoil too much, but they've got massive plans for Collegiate. And Riot, I think as well, has massive plans for Collegiate in the coming year. So can't say too much, but like to have it happen in Valorant so quickly when like CSGO and League have been trying to do it for years and years to elevate the collegiate scene. Like, dude, Valorant's done it in the game's only been out for like a year and a half, basically. And at this level where we're seeing really strong teams. Now, obviously, I'm not going to be one to sugarcoat and say like these teams can compete at tier 1 level, right? There's a very big skill gap, as you're talking about, Tanner, between the teams themselves, but from collegiate to tier 1 as well, and like just normal Valorant play. So I'm hoping that if we continue to see more of these events, right, you elevate the youth level and around the world, right, not just in North America, which we know can be very good, but just around the world, the level starts to go up. We see a lot more talent produced out of these countries that maybe like Egypt, like we didn't expect. So I'm super pumped to see this come into play, and hopefully we will see like a much better generation of FPS players come out of it.
I must say, Riot have been really good at all of these initiatives. You know, the female scene, the collegiate scene, like they've been putting a lot of effort into these satellite scenes. Oh, hey, look at that. Thank you, Ed. What a beautiful little screenshot there. That's the stage. So you guys, if you happen to miss the stream, that's what it looked like. It was off the charts, absolutely fantastic. And I think the biggest thing, so obviously the teams themselves, like as units, could not compete in a tier 1 level. Let's, like you said, we're not going to sugarcoat this one. But I think the big takeaway is that there is a lot of individual talent, diamonds in the rough, that have an opportunity to be polished with a little bit extra time and some dedication. And much like, you know, we spoke about Shalaby being picked up by Vitality. There's potential there. Another cool thing is the coach of Na'Vi, Smart 7, something like that. He was actually playing for Belarus, who barely missed the finals. They were both 3-2. They actually had the higher map differential against Project S, but they lost the head-to-head. So they almost found themselves in the final there. And again, coach of Na'Vi really putting on a show, showing that coaches, it's not just about those who can't teach. So this is really exciting in general for students. I just want to ask, so obviously we know that Anubis won it out, but were there any other players or teams that really stood out to you guys that you would want to kind of shout out to?
I think one of the major teams that a lot of people expect to do super well had to have been BTR, right? The Canadian team, the Canadian representatives. I think they looked really good. I believe I've heard that a couple of the players are considering retiring. I'm not too sure on that exactly. So, you know, they made a really deep run. If they do consider retiring, which I hope that they don't consider retiring because they looked really good. It's not maybe a 5 that would stick around for a long time, but like you said, Sam, there's a lot of individual talent. So that whole BTR lineup is probably one of the most exciting rosters to see. And obviously, you know, fan of North America, I got to root on the Canadians and the Americans.
Yeah, so I'm in the same boat. I think Rejante was one of like the really star players. I've watched him kind of through the tier 2 scene and playing, and so being able to see him play on that stage, it did it phenomenally. Janny also on the Jet was playing absolutely cracked. So another kind of solid name to keep your eyes on. And then I thought, so although I thought the finals was fairly one-sided, I think it went all 5 games, but the maps were, you know, pretty decisive one way or the other. I really thought for Project S, they had a very versatile team. They had 3 players playing 3 different agents in the finals. So sure, you have 5 maps, but to have something like that, that's, I think, a point that when it comes to going pro, everybody basically says this. I know there's been Twitter threads on it as well, but you can't just be the Jet 1 trick. Sure, it might work for some, it might, but if you're really trying to give yourself a shot, you have to do more, and that's what a lot of the players on Project S were doing.
So the one player, speaking of Project S, the one player that I really wanted to shout out was Bati, the freaking sheriff headshot machine. Some of those shots were absolutely illegal. Now, we actually see quite a few players that seem to get ridiculous value. They turn the sheriff into an operator, but it was crazy. It was so much fun to watch. So looking forward to seeing more from these players, hopefully in the future. And just speaking of that last match, it really was a little back and forth. I think so. It was the reverse sweep for Anubis. Project S win the first two maps. Second map was a 13-0. I remember the whole desk going, "Listen, if you're getting 13-0, you are definitely doing something wrong." And then I think like in the next map, Anubis came through. It was like a 13-1 or a 13-2. Like it really was so scrappy. But it was a really cool event. Looking forward to more. And of course, that means that Anubis get free tickets to go and watch Masters in Berlin.
That's cool.
So exciting.
That's sick.
And then, of course, $20,000 prize pool is massive. All right. So finally, we're moving on over to Valorant's Femme Fatales. Yes, it is the female scene. First and foremost, we had the Huntress Trials. I usually cast this, but unfortunately I was unavailable. But it was a fantastic event. I must say, so I don't know how much you guys know about the female scene in Valorant. This is usually where Mike gives me the mic and says, all right, go ahead. And then we go on to the next topic.
We'll let you run with it.
Basically. But yeah, Gangsters snagged the top spot. They came in second in the last tournament. And the previous winners were Project X, who actually came in second this time around. And then Oxygen, who's been kind of back and forth a little bit. They managed to snag their top 4. I think one of the most interesting teams out of this is Xset. They had their debut in the previous one. And this time around, again, just not quite able to get out of the top 5 to 8 placement. And apart from that, I just wish this tournament had double elim because I think that would just make it phenomenal. Do you guys know much about the female team? Want to jump in on anything here?
Like the only thing I can really say is like I believe it was, I can't remember. It was Freya and maybe it was the Goose House that played in the actual VCT just yesterday. No, I was saying that's super sick, and I'm really excited to see like the EU female scene finally get some recognition, right? And to have those two teams compete in the actual circuit is super sick. So all I can really say is I hope there's a lot more of this, and you know, as you were saying, fingers crossed we have game changes in EU sometime soon.
Yeah, and so to kind of, it was Freya who played against, I believe it was against Heretics. So it's, you know, you're starting in the round of 256 and you're playing against one of the better teams, you know, that you could say in the top 10. So I think you get a whole lot out of that. What I love the most, okay, is that we're seeing Oxygen Esports competing in this with a female team. And the name, that is, it's 2 X's because that's
it's
like
so good, right?
I want it. That's like the female chromosome XX, so it's Oxygen with 2 X for the. That is the hats off. The first time to Oxygen Esports.
The first time they competed in one of the Huntress Trials, it was like 2 or 3 iterations back, and I just like lost my mind about it. And they actually clipped it, and they were like, "Thank you for appreciating this thing we did with our names." It's like, yeah,
that's cool.
It was so cool. It's so much better than going Oxygen FE. Oh,
right.
Teams that do that just make me want to cry. So yeah, it is a fun little naming thing. All right, let's hop on over to NA, where we've had, and I think you guys will be able to kind of dip in a little bit more on this one. But we just recently had the Sakura Cup. And of course, some interesting results there. First and foremost, we didn't have the top team in Cloud9 competing. For some reason, they just never do. There was another team that I feel didn't compete, and I am massively blanking, but not the end of the world. Dignitas, thank you. Yes, so Dignitas and Cloud9 were not competing, but some interesting storylines here. First and foremost, this is the first look at TSM without Zoe. So how did you guys feel about that? Tanner, let's start with you because you're quite involved in the FE scene as well.
Yeah, I am. Very, very hands-on with game changers, the female scene, and I think it's mostly thanks to my partner Mimi. She drags me along to these events and allows me to be a part of that. So shout out to Evil Cat. And we also were casting the Shopify TSM final, so we got to take a first glance at what the TSM team had, and it looked good. I think Dodo Nut is a really solid play. The only problem I think in this series is that map number 1 was Breeze, and they had Dodo, the brand new player playing for Zoe, who's trialing right now, playing the Viper. And although Viper is kind of a mainstay on that map, teams are still trying to figure out how to play that map. So to put your brand new player on one of the most important agents on the map, and where you're still kind of trying to figure things out yourself, it really made for a bad map one. I think if we didn't have Breeze, we had something else, TSM would have taken it away. But Shopify, after dropping their coach, looked fantastic. We got an interview at the end of that one too, and they looked really good in their own right, just the way that they're able to talk through things. We were talking about their technical timeouts, and they're like, yeah, we were just talking among ourselves, right? We don't have a coach anymore. We only have a manager, and we just figure it out on the fly. So they're looking just as strong. It's hard to say. You love to see this, but it is hard to say, like you say, Sam, because Cloud9 didn't participate. Dignitas wasn't in this. I don't think Manila Fwogs was in this one as well. So a couple of solid teams that, not to take anything away from this grand final victory for Shopify, but if Cloud9 was here, you know, how do things differ?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm not one to like speak too much on this because I'm not as involved as you guys are, but one of the things that really caught my eye and one of the things that like surprisingly was actually working, you know, I don't have all the time to sit through and watch every single game, but I'm here and there. But one of the things that really caught my eye was Shopify Rebellion. I don't know if you guys know too much on this, but they had a 6-man roster and like it actually worked. Is what I'm hearing. So like I'm not too involved with it. I want to know what your guys' thoughts are in more particular, and if like maybe this is something that we see a little more often, just for Sully's sake, basically.
Well, yeah. So this is cool because in the interview, I believe we interviewed, it was with Diana, and the way that they worked their 6-player roster, it wasn't like a specific player on a specific agent on a specific map. It was basically like, well, there's 3 of us who can jet op, and if one of us isn't hitting our shots, then the other one steps in and plays. Like if one of us is having a bad day, then the other one will step in. Our 6th will fill that spot and make it work. So it was kind of out of the box thinking to where I think if you're thinking more along the tactical side of things, you're like, okay, we need to have, all right, Han is going to play our jet op here, which means we need to move this. It was just, well, if I'm playing bad, Han plays. Or if I'm playing bad, you know, Lori hops in. So it was a really cool to hear how they worked that one.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that we've spoken about a couple times on the show in the past, the 6-person versus solid 5-person roster. And it's a bit of a double-edged sword. It has its ups and downs. Yes, you have an extra person. You have a little bit more flexibility. As Tanner says, if one person isn't hitting their shots, you kind of swap it out a little bit. You have access to a wider agent pool, particularly if, you know, if one player can play like these 4 agents, another player you get like a Venn diagram going on, and they can play these 2 of those agents, but they can also play these 3 other agents or whatever. So it gives you that little bit extra. But of course, when it comes to like scrim time, you're kind of lessening at least one person's time in the server in the scrim, because not all 6 people can play at the same time. And then that leads to slightly lowered synergy. It's not necessarily massive, but it's one of those small details that can make a difference further on. So I'm still on the fence about 6-person rosters. We'll see how that shapes up in the future. And I think that's where we'll wrap up for Sakura Cup. Now, just the last thing in the female tournament area, there is a neat little link on Liquipedia where you can go and have a look. There's actually a tab specifically for female tournaments, and you can go and have a look and find out all of the female tournaments in your region. Now, they do show previous tournaments, but they show upcoming tournaments as well. Most notably for those of us in NA and EU, we've got Birds of Prey coming up, which is the Goose House Games. And I believe there was another Girl Gamer Challenge, I think. No. There's another one coming up for NA as well. Go Gamer Challenge in August. There you go. So, if you want to get your fix of female Valorant, if you want to know what's going on in the other regions as well, you can see Southeast Asia, Oceania, Brazil. You can go check that out and go and see how they're performing. Everyone has a game changers except EU. I'm never going to stop harping off on that one. But let's move on into the meat of our show with like 10 minutes left. VCT EU started yesterday. We do not have a bracket because that bracket was massive and we would be here for the full hour just talking about it. But Leica from RixGG very kindly went and created kind of a permutation table with some of the more notable teams. Now, not necessarily notable to viewers, but notable to the scene itself, because obviously these teams scrim against each other. They've got players that have been around for quite some time, etc., etc. So these are the teams that are more likely to be playing against the teams who had already made it through to the closed qualifiers, which, just a reminder, is Alliance, Ninja Pajamas, Wave, Vitality, Finest, BK Rog, 10 Star, and Big. So looking at this, now the first thing that I wanted to kind of just point out is that XL are already out after yesterday.
Mhm.
And this team just cannot get it together. But it seems that we've still got quite a few good teams left in the mix. So my question to you guys, who do you think is going to be making it through at the end?
True, that is.
Or
It is a
rather,
bloodbath.
let me clarify.
Okay, yeah.
Who do you think will make it through to meet up against Alliance et al? So who do we think is making it through to the close qualifier?
True, that's a rough one because it's a bloodbath, right? I'm looking at like the
Oh, yeah.
bracket 1B at the bottom left. I see Heretics, no poaching, and I'm like, dude, that's already a very stacked part of the bracket. So it's really hard to pick. But if I had to like pick a team that I'm like, okay, I feel like they are gonna make it through, I'd probably have to go with Heretics. Then again, with the recent changes they've had, right, they've been playing against like the lower tier teams in Europe. When maybe they finally meet up against no poaching, please, which I think is a poised matchup in the round of 32. That's maybe where things turn on their heads. So I have to go Team Heretics, but I also feel like no poaching, please, can also make like a pretty big upset, if you will, against Heretics in advance to play against NIP.
And so to piggyback off of that, we're getting close. I'm taking a peek at the bracket. Heretics and no poaching, they're both up one map in their round of 64. So it does look like ideally they will meet in the round of 32. Is that exactly what it is? And for that specifically, that matchup alone, this is the best time. If you're going to upset, you're going to try and take advantage of that new player, of the lack of communication or not necessarily knowing all of the set plays. So I think it's a really good place to be for no poaching to get a pretty solid upset over a Heretics team that's kind of wounded. They're bandaged a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of hoping that OG do make it through there. I see they've already made it through to the next portion of the bracket. Another team that I'm really hoping to see succeed is Vexed Gaming. They're actually in the screenshot, but they're listed as Malik. They were a team that competed in the ESL Valorant UK and I skirmish. They came quite far. They have been picked up by Vexed, and they're kind of 1-1 at the moment. So hopefully they make it through there. Another one, oh man, I was kind of hoping that Area were going to make it through, but I've just checked the bracket. They've also been knocked out. And aside from that, it really is kind of anybody's game at this point. I guess we'll have to just wait a little bit longer to find out. Now, there has been a little bit of drama in the EU scene recently. This may have popped up on your Twitters here and there across the Twitterverse. So we'll just dive into it a little bit and explain the situation. So Movie Star Riders is an organization, and they were given they had to forfeit, essentially. They were forced to forfeit. Now, how it was explained was that there was a bug on the website which forced them to have to forfeit. But the Valorant Champions Tour EU Twitter account came up, and I'm just going to preface this before I get straight into this, because this is really weird to be doing just on the Twitter timeline. You would think that this is happening behind doors somewhere, but the social media manager comes out and says, actually, the default win was because there was a player on your team that didn't ready up. And then he says, if you want further clarification, please open a ticket. Fine, okay, cool, telling the person the right channels. We don't have a screenshot of this, unfortunately, but then Mikas goes and replies and says, what are you talking about? We were ready, this is nonsense. And then Mr. or Mrs. Social Media Manager replies again and says, actually, if you click on this link and go look at the logs, you will see that none of your players had readied up. Which, again, is just a really weird thing for the social media manager to be getting involved with on the Twitter timeline. Anyway, the player in question came out with a tweet longer. And again, this is one of those things where wording is so important, because he says that, unfortunately, they couldn't play VCT because of the issue. He forgot to check in. It's his mistake, you know. And with that, he is no longer on Movie Star Riders. Now, the wording really makes it sound like the org were like, all right, you screwed up, you're off the team. But it's also very likely that this was like a contractual thing, like, okay, you're on the team until the end of stage 3, which, because they had to forfeit, means that that game was the end of stage 3 for them. I don't know if that's actually true. Maybe he did get kicked because he didn't ready up. I'm not 100% sure. But overall, this is just a really weird situation. Tanner, what do you think about all of this?
So I think the biggest thing that stands out to me that makes this a whole lot weirder is you have the org kind of questioning what's going on. Like, we got disqualified for whatever reason. You have the social media manager kind of chiming in or for the EU Valorant Champions Tour. And then you have this player saying, I completely forgot to check in. So it's kind of like this was a mistake that was made by the team, but then they tried to play it off as something else, which also is another bad look. It does sting that the player is being released. And I would hope that, like you said, it is kind of just a contractual thing, because actually it's hard to say, because if it was a bug, I would say there's no way you kick this guy because of that. But if your player just neglects to check in, one of the biggest things to even be able to play, then I could see why the organization, Movistar Riders, is like, all right, man, we got to let you go. Like, this is big boy rules over here. And that was not big boy stuff.
Yeah, I'm getting like flashbacks to when LG, I think it was venerated, like slept in for an event and wasn't there to ready up. So
God.
like I'm in agreement. It's like, did he get kicked? Because I'm pretty sure that's why venerated got kicked from LG's, because he literally slept through an event. And like you say, it's the big boy leagues. But whatever the thing is, it's like, okay, let's just move on from this. It's not that big of a deal in my eyes, but player makes a mistake again. It's like, move on, learn from it, and hopefully progress further in your career. So that's all I can say about it.
The one thing that I will just kind of chime in on here is, isn't this why teams have managers? Like, maybe I'm putting too much expectation on the manager to just like go and check the website and be like, okay, everyone's readied up. Cool, we're good. Hang on, you didn't ready up. Okay, wake up, get up. Calling you at 4 a.m. You gotta check in right now, otherwise we're not gonna be able to play. Maybe that's not the manager's job, and I'm just being too picky. But I feel like that should be part of the manager's job. I don't know.
It's like
I don't think you're wrong.
Yeah, but the manager's also not like a babysitter in that sense. True. It's like, you should be waking up. Like, you're on a professional team.
I feel like they are.
Yeah, that's also true. Yeah, that's also true. We are in esports.
Oh, well, hopefully the babysitters get paid a little bit extra and they can start doing that as well. All right, that's going to wrap up VCT EU. We're almost at the end of the show, and you might be thinking, hold up, we got like 3 minutes left. How are we going to cover NA? We're going to touch on NA right about now. First and foremost, just want to go over the teams that have already qualified to the main event. Of course, that's Pioneers, Gen.G, Version 1, and Rise. They are going to be waiting in the wings for the first couple of days to play through. And I just want to let you guys know that if you're interested in the Pioneers, if you don't know too much about them, Nerd Street Gamers actually went and had an interview with the chief gaming officer. You can tell it's the end of the episode. I can't talk anymore. Went on an interview with the chief gaming officer of Pioneers. So if you go to, I think it's nerdstreet.com/news, potentially, you can go and find tons of cool articles there where we have interviews with different players, coaches, etc., etc. And of course, this one is about Pioneers. You can go and have a look at that one. Now, we are going to more or less wrap it up here, because the VCT pre-show, the Press Forward to Defuse pre-show, will be back tomorrow evening before the start of VCT. So everything you want to know about NA VCT, about the teams, about the matchups, all of that good stuff, make sure that you are at the broadcast 20 minutes or so before the games actually start, so you can catch the pre-show desk there as we talk about all the interesting news and upsets potentially that will be coming through. That's going to be it from us, so please do go and follow us. Our names are below our faces if you enjoy what you see. Definitely follow Nerd Street Gamers. Definitely follow this channel, because, of course, this is where all of the action is going to be starting from tomorrow. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out. Thank you, Sully and Tanner, for being my guests today. This would have been a terribly boring show without you. And I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. We will see you guys next week, 1 p.m. Eastern, every week for Press Forward to Defuse. And of course, we'll see you tomorrow for the pre-show. Have a wonderful evening, afternoon, whatever the case may be. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye now.